What's up, everybody? This is Zach with the Libertarian Party of Nebraska, and I am here with Jake Porter from the Libertarian Party of Iowa, and he is running for governor of Iowa. Jake, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's been a fun day. Uh, we hit the gym earlier, so I'm getting swole. Uh, what have you done today? Have been having a good day?
I have. I've already been to work and done with that, so that's always good.
It's always good to
And
be
I've
off
got the
work.
rest of the. Yes, it is.
So I wanted to have you on here. Initially, I reached out to you because you were talking about running for vice chair of the Libertarian Party. You informed me that you're no longer seeking that nomination. Do you want to talk about that at all, or do you want to just move on from that?
Certainly. So I did consider running for vice chair. I decided against that. There's too much work to do here locally, I think. And I served a term, as an alternate to the national committee years ago, 2008 to 2010, I believe it was. And serving on national committees it can drain a lot of resources that we could spend locally, and I like to focus there as much as possible. And enough people convince me that's where I should focus a majority of my time
Uh,
here at this level.
when I was, it's funny that you say that, talking about spending resources locally, because that's something that Senator Ebke here in Nebraska and Ben Backus out in western Nebraska have talked about a lot recently. Um, do you feel that the Libertarian Party is the path to success is paved through building a farm team, or do you think that we are better off trying to hit this home run with building a big presidential campaign or Senate campaigns?
I think it's kind of like a vehicle. You have to have all the parts working, or else it's not going to go anywhere. But I generally support local organization as opposed to throwing all of our resources. There's a lot of people that come up with these ideas that we'll throw all of our resources into one or two races. Obviously, Senator Abke, for example, has done very, very well in Nebraska and great chances of getting reelected. But even throwing all the resources in that, we don't gain anything from it. But I would rather us focus a lot more locally um, towards helping people like her stay in the races as opposed to throwing all of our money into a presidential race or a gubernatorial race or a congressional race. I would rather we also build up the local organizations of county parties, county affiliates, candidates for city council, the people that will eventually run for office. I'm running for governor, in part because we don't have a lot of people stepping up saying, I'm going to run for governor too. If we had great candidates stepping up and running for these offices, I wouldn't be doing that. I would focus on either running for state house or maybe even just taking a couple years off.
Yeah.
But we don't have that built up yet in the party.
So you just said something that kind of reminded me. So in Nebraska we have the unicameral, so we don't have a state house and a state senate. We just have the one. How is that? How different is that for you guys? Do you think there's a lot more positions to run for in Iowa than there are in Nebraska because of that? And one would think that running for a state house position would be something obtainable for a small party. Is there interest in that in Iowa? Are you getting good candidates for things like that?
We are. So it's always a challenge to get candidates, and we've grown a lot. We've actually ran more candidates in 2016 than we ever have in the history of the party, the 45-year history of the party. So we're definitely doing that. I anticipate there will be 50 to 60 candidates running in Iowa. Most are going to be running for the state representative seats as well.
That's
So
awesome.
and we've also got, I don't know how many counties Nebraska has. In Iowa, we've got 99 counties. So there's all kinds of county positions, too, some of which only require a couple signatures on the ballot now.
Yeah, I think we have 93.
That's
I'm
great.
I'm I'm not that like I would have to get Ben on here for that kind of stuff. um, so have you run for another office before? Is this your first time, or have you built some experience already?
Yeah, in 2010, I ran for Secretary of State, and then I also ran again for Secretary of State in 2014.
Okay.
Uh, one of the biggest accomplishments we had was in the 2014 campaign. The party, if you would go to the Department of Transportation to register, basically whenever you go get your license, you would have the option to register to vote, and you could choose the party. So we had the option to register as a libertarian even before we were a major party. But if you would do that, it would come back as no party every time you would do that. And so we were losing, thousands of registered voters based on that. So was the Green Party. Mm-hmm. And we knew something was going on, but we never had enough evidence of it. And I actually moved back. I was living in Falls City, Nebraska from 2011 to some point in 2013. And I moved back to Iowa, and the same thing happened to me. And so I said, now something's odd. And I asked several people and said, oh, this has also happened to me. And so we contacted the Secretary of State's office. They said, oh, no, it's just a clerical error. We'll talk about clerical errors. So, I ended up putting it all in, I think, a spreadsheet at Google Drive. And we had a form that people could fill out. And we ended up with, I think it was over 30 names. And this was just within a couple of days of me asking on Facebook and calling up friends. Did this happen to you? And we actually sent it over to the Iowa Senate Democrats. The Secretary of State happened to be a Republican at the time, so I contacted the Iowa Senate Democrats who oversee the office. I said, well, here's the issue. And within about 1 week, the Secretary of State's office had fixed it for us after that. But before that, it was always, it's got clerical error. And we went through this for years under Democrat and Republican.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest thing that got fixed.
Yeah, we, the best part about Senator Ebke for the party, I mean, putting aside that she's been a great senator,
yes.
But having that bill pass, and I forgot the number of the bill, but it's the one where if you get access and then stay over 10,000 registered voters, you keep access. So now we're not having to fight those clerical errors nearly as much because they can't ignore us anymore.
Absolutely. So,
for comparison, do you guys track how many registered libertarians you have in Iowa? How are you guys doing post-election?
We have, it's somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 right now. I haven't pulled the report myself in a couple months, mm-hmm. but I think it was about 9,400 last time I checked.
Okay.
So we're going up about 80 a month, I think is what the average is.
Okay. So that's about what we're doing. Is that something you told me before we started that you weren't you stepped aside from party leadership to run? Is that something that they're tracking within the party more? And since you're running, you're letting them do that?
Yeah, and I have my campaign staff. They track that, and as far as we can target voters and contact them to do things as well. So I don't know the exact statistics, but I do know it's slightly under 10,000, but over 9,000.
That's great.
Yeah, it was. I think about it was under 2,000 just 4 or 5 years ago.
It's a big jump.
So it's a lot of things are changing. I've been in the party. It's around. I think I first started to get active around 2004 and first joined the state party in 2006.
Okay.
So we went from having very little activity to all kinds of activity like we see today.
Great. So to kind of focus in on your gubernatorial, that's a fun word, your race, so you will have a primary opponent, which is amazing for the Libertarian Party.
Oh, yeah.
That we're getting this. So make your case just for the Libertarian primary. Why should you be the candidate for the Libertarian Party of Iowa?
I think you've been involved in the party for a long time, been involved in the state party for over 10 years. I've worked on a lot of campaigns, well over a dozen campaigns if we count them all. We have to get over 2% to maintain major party status. And both of my runs for Secretary of State, I've received over 3%, over 30,000 votes. At one point, it was the second highest vote total in the history of the state party. Now, that's ever since that was in 2010. That's been surpassed now. The couple of candidates, and with Gary Johnson, too. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think we can maintain that major party status. I have a network across Iowa. I do media interviews frequently, TV interviews, radio. a lot of newspaper interviews. We've been featured in all the biggest newspapers and radio stations in Iowa.
Okay. So you've ran for office several times. You've worked on a lot of campaigns. What is something that you've learned in that time that maybe other people who are thinking about running wouldn't know? Like, what's some good advice you could give someone who's running for the first time?
It is scary at first, and I think one of the biggest things is once you're committed to running, you go out there and you run, and it's a great networking opportunity. And when I say networking, you could also network with your political opponents, and you can get them to steal your ideas on occasion too, maybe just one or two of them. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that if they end up winning and you have somebody then you can work with, someone that will help you out, like on our voter registration issues. That was because of personal networks that we had built. Okay. So and it's also a great way to bring people into the party. I think a lot of the candidates that I see running local, I can remember when we've recruited them into the party years ago. Now we're starting to see them take the steps. I would also suggest that don't run for office just one time. Run 2 or 3 times. It gets a lot easier. It gets a lot more fun whenever you've done it a couple of times rather than just the first time. It's scary. You're still learning everything, and then it becomes easier.
So let's project out a little bit and say that you have won the Libertarian primary for the state of Iowa, and you're on to the general election. Turning independent voters seems to be the key to a Libertarian being successful. So 2 questions. One, we've been learning in Nebraska that there's actually a lot of disdain for Republicans and Democrats, and people are very much trying to see anything else, even if they don't necessarily agree with all of it. And I think we saw that a lot with Trump, who's not really a Republican or a Democrat. So what would you say to independent voters to get them on your side? And do you think Iowa is similar to Nebraska in that there's this large distrust for the 2 major parties?
Yeah, and first of all, I do think Iowa and Nebraska are very similar, particularly when it comes to I live right here in Council Bluffs, so right on the border. So I see very very much similarities. People are fed up. I had people that I worked with over when I worked at Yahoo that came up to me and they said they were former Democrats that said I cannot vote for Hillary Clinton. I had the same thing with Trump supporters that I could not vote for him. And it's larger than just Hillary Clinton or Trump.
Right.
It's they're more, I think, of results of what we get when people are this divided and this angry and this upset.
Symptoms of the problem.
Symptoms of the problem, not necessarily. I don't think they're the problem themselves. I mean, you've got a lot of people that are upset, whether it be the Ron Paul campaign, the Bernie Sanders campaign. A lot of people just showing that they know things are not working. Now, some of the people like Bernie Sanders, their solutions aren't the best, right, obviously, but they're getting votes because people are upset. Mm-hmm. But I think we can ask the voters, what have we accomplished so far? You've had Democrats and Republicans. Iowa is a state that changes back frequently. And no matter what happens, spending goes up, but they can't maintain basic government services either. Mm-hmm. You can talk to independent voters, and they can see that the current direction that we're going in is not working. We have fewer civil liberties than what we did, 5, 10, 15 years ago. You have less economic freedom. We pay more to the government, but we're getting fewer even government services. What we've got is not working. In Iowa, we have big problems with corporate welfare. The state literally gives tax incentives to companies, and they stick the smaller businesses with the tax bill. And one thing they even do is they have this research activities tax credit. So where even there's these businesses that are not even paying taxes in Iowa, but the state will write them a check to conduct this research. Now, the research is pretty open as to what it can be about. A lot of problems with corporate welfare, so they're not paying the taxes, but the taxes always get added to really the poorest Iowans, mm-hmm. whether it be increasing the sales tax, which is, I think, doubled since 1980, increasing taxes on vehicle registration, things that everyone has to have a vehicle pretty much to go to their job, to do things like that. That's the things that they're adding the taxes to, and you're getting fewer government services for. So people know that things are not working. There's also a lot of cronyism, a lot of a lot of problems with that.
So that's something I talk to a lot of my friends and like battle buddies and all that who are from bigger cities on the coast or down in Texas or whatever, and they don't understand when we talk about tire taxes and having a vehicle and putting a lot of miles on a vehicle. They don't understand that here in the Midwest, everything's spread out. You don't operate without a vehicle. I got a friend in Baltimore who hasn't driven in 10 years because she doesn't need to. I can't go 3 days without having to drive somewhere. It would be impossible.
Yeah, there's no way to get across even from Council Bluffs into West Omaha where I work. There's a good 40-minute drive,
Yep.
every day that I go over. There's no way you can take public transportation over there, and I'm certainly not going to walk across I-80. So
Not that brave.
not that brave.
All right. So one of the questions that I got posed from one of our group chats, let's say you pull off what would be the biggest victory we've had in the Libertarian Party, and you win the governorship of Iowa. What is what's your pet issue? Because every Libertarian has one. What's the first thing you go after? Like, this is getting cut or reduced. What's your issue?
Well, I've already created kind of a plan of what libertarian administration would look like. That way, people can kind of have an understanding. The first thing that I would do is go in there and I would rescind. There was an executive order that the former Governor Branstad put out that took away the voting rights of anyone that had been convicted of a felony after they'd paid their time and served their time and paid for their crime.
That can be an executive order?
Well, so there was some executive orders that were done, and he rescinded them, I believe. But right now it's his executive order that stands. And so you've got about 25,000 Iowans that have, served their sentence that cannot vote. And there's no way to get that back other than making this executive order. So that would be day number one. Mm-hmm. If you've served your time and paid for your crime, you should have voting rights restored. And we should also look at gun rights. That becomes a little bit complicated because that is anyone that was convicted in an Iowa court. So a federal court, of course, I can't do anything about. If it was from another state, I can't do anything about. But I can do if you were convicted in an Iowa court of, let's say, a non-violent crime, a victimless crime, for example. If you were caught with marijuana, should you really have your gun rights taken away? Right. There's examples of that we'll have to go through case by case. That would be the first thing. The second thing would be an audit. Basically, I will look through, me and my lieutenant governor, whoever that may be. We've not decided that yet. But we will go through and we will have look through every government agency in Iowa. We will see what can be cut, what can be eliminated, what can be consolidated. There's a lot of pet projects in the Iowa budget, and I would go through there. And I've downloaded the budget. I've had a look at it, but there's so many things hidden in there that I want to make sure we know exactly what we're getting into. You will find things hidden in education that have nothing to do with education. I wonder, okay, why is the state involved in this?
So I have not. I kind of wanted to give you a shot at this because I don't like to steal people's thunder a whole lot. So I don't know what Iowa spends on education per student. I know the national average is somewhere around 8,000-ish. So my question is, I was homeschooled, and schooling for me was never more than $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So what do you think needs to be done with the education system to bring the level of education up to match the amount of funding that we're giving? Because 8,000 a student should be enough.
I find it pretty funny. In Iowa, we spend, depending on whose estimates you believe, the Iowa Communications Network, we spend about $50 million a year on this thing. The Iowa Communications Network does something very similar to what we're doing now with Skype. It was something that was built back in the state of Iowa built their own telecommunications company back in 1989. Mm-hmm. And the thing is still around today, even though it serves very little function. The state's been trying to sell this thing off for 22 years now. That's one thing you can look at in education. and you can see, okay, there's an issue right there, and we have a lot of projects like that. Another thing is our system of education will have to change. I mean, everything's changing right now. You can take classes online for free. You can take classes online anywhere. Get instructors from across the world that you can conduct business, that you can learn all kinds of skills at your own pace instead of a one size fits all. We're all going to learn in this big classroom at the same pace. So you'll still have school buildings, I'm sure, but I think there needs to be a lot of market innovation in there as to how we educate people, or how we educate kids. It's just a changing system. Everything else is changing. Business is changing. I think about the consulting work I do. Now we have people that text in their appointments whenever they want to show up, right? That was something a few years ago you couldn't do. Business is changing fast. I mean, Amazon Prime will get us products within 2 days, but we're still using the same models of education that we've used for the past few hundred years.
Yeah.
And that's got to change.
And
then it will change.
Even when you look at the school year, I mean, that's based on us being an agricultural economy, and like that's still somewhat true in Nebraska and Iowa, but how many kids are actually farm kids now?
Yeah, even if you go to rural communities, most of the kids aren't doing very much on the farm as well. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that has also changed with time. But our education system has not updated from anything that we've been doing for the past 100 years.
When you're running for governor, one of the things that I've seen Larry Sharp talk about a lot, and I think he's dead on, is that you need down-ticket races to drive up voter participation. So what would you, like, what kind of races would you like to see other libertarians in Iowa step up for? And how do you think, like, do you have any good ideas for how you could work together to really drive the movement forward in the next election?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one thing I'm actually doing is recruiting people to run for office, and then also providing them campaign training, training on how to get on the ballot since things have changed, how to send press releases out. There's resources that I can provide all these candidates. We're already doing this, right? And that they can also help out. So if I know that there is a local newspaper or reporter that wants to report on something and they ask me, maybe I can't make it, we can have a local candidate go over there and then do that interview and also get them some publicity in their race. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, if I'm the only person running, there's no purpose of me running for governor, right? It doesn't, we're here to build a party and to build a movement. And if I'm running for governor, I get this major party status and we don't run any candidates other than keeping major party status, there's no purpose of us doing that. Mm-hmm. So I think we should run a lot of as many candidates as possible that are qualified for it and want to do it. And I guess I want people to run for an office that they're comfortable with. I'm not comfortable running for office, at the federal level. I don't take an interest into those issues as much. So you're probably not going to see me run for Congress or Senate or president or anything like that. But I am interested in running for stuff at the state level, and maybe at some point even the local level. So it depends on what people's interests are. But, you get to address a lot of issues in the state legislature, mm-hmm. State senator in Nebraska. You get to discuss a lot of the important issues of the day. And then also at city council, all politics is local. That's a great place where we've had very good success at winning city council races here in Iowa.
Great.
And actually changing policy.
All right. Well, is there anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
Well, I greatly appreciate you having me on here and doing this and all the work you guys are doing over in Nebraska.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. For Jake Porter, I'm Zach Taylor from the LPNE. Thank you and have a wonderful week.